blockchain and cryptocurrency at Forbes magazine. And I'd like to ask everybody to give us a virtual round of applause. Welcome Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss to the virtual stage. I'll clap for everyone. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you, Michael. Great to be here.
It's a pleasure to be speaking with you again. First of all, I do have to take a moment to congratulate you for making the cover of Forbes magazine lately. I had the pleasure of recently crossing paths with it at an airport on the way to a reporting trip, and it was cool to see crypto making the front page of Forbes magazine.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, and so I don't want to assume too much knowledge of our audience, though obviously I think Ethereal Summit has largely gathered a bunch of pros. There's probably a decent number of newcomers out there as well. So what I'd love to do is, I just want to, first of all, introduce you as the co-founders of Gemini, which I think most people know you as, a cryptocurrency exchange trading Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a dozen other cryptocurrency assets. But we're here to largely talk about something that many of the audience might not know about, which is something called Nifty Gateway. Gotten a lot of headlines lately, but definitely a bit newer. So I'd love to kind of just kick things off. If you could kind of give us a quick little top down about what is Nifty Gateway and how does it position within the Gemini universe?
Sure. Tyler, you can go for it. Or?
Yeah, I would say at the simplest level, Nifty Gateway is very similar to Gemini in the sense that Gemini allows you to buy, sell, and store cryptos like Bitcoin and Ether, whereas Nifty Gateway allows you to buy, sell, and store NFTs. So there's similarities in the sense that there's an exchange and custodial aspect to both platforms.
And Cameron, what is an NFT? Give us a quick once over on that as well.
Sure. So NFT stands for non-fungible token. These are unique collectible assets that are sort of stored on the Ethereum blockchain represented there. And Nifty Gateway sort of focuses on fine art and digital artists who basically build NFTs and sell them on Nifty Gateway.
Great. And I think in recent months, we've seen NFTs and more headlines than I think anybody could count. I am now answering, instead of what is Bitcoin, I'm now answering the question, what is an NFT, I think more often. But it wasn't always that way. In fact, you purchased Nifty Gateway long before NFTs were in headlines. And the NFT as a concept percolated around for years, even before you purchased Nifty Gateway. In my conversations with you as part of our reporting for the cover story that was recently published, one of my favorite anecdotes was sort of you guys behind the scenes hitting the ground and trying to help Nifty Gateway happen. In particular, I love the story of the role that cold calls played in helping jumpstart Nifty Gateway. One of you was particularly astute at the cold call, and I'd love if you could hop in here and tell us a little bit about what you did, who you called, and how that helped play a role in getting Nifty Gateway off the ground.
Sure. So you're right. We acquired Nifty Gateway. Gemini acquired Nifty Gateway about 2 years ago, which in NFT land feels like a decade. So much has happened even in this year alone. But one of the important things we thought that would be important to the marketplace being successful was the quality of the content. So a simple UI user experience where it's as easy as opening up an account at Amazon. Also a non-crypto experience. So you could purchase an NFT using the credit card in your wallet, which is possible on Nifty Gateway. You can also use Ether in cryptos, but if you don't necessarily have to. So it's the experience, and then the content is king kind of thing. And so early on, about a year and a half ago or so, I started stalking digital artists or artists on Twitter, on Instagram. I would DM them we'd come up with a list of really cool street artists or whatever kind of creators, and the hit rate was pretty good. It feels like maybe 3 out of 10 people responded. A little bit less were kind of interested to hear more in the concept, but ultimately was able to get in touch with Kenny Scharf, who's a very famous artist who is contemporaries with Basquiat. He agreed to join or do a drop on Nifty Gateway early on. And then as the success kept happening, the cold calls started changing. So people started knocking down our doors. A lot of the people who I DM'd and didn't get a response from, a year later, miraculously, responded. They're like, "Oh, this was lost," or "I found this."
Yeah.
And so it's been a similar situation with Bitcoin. It's like, hey, Bitcoin's really amazing, and kind of we're pitching and everybody about that, and sort of getting a lot of no's. And then enter 2017, all those same people are knocking down Gemini's doors. They're chasing us. Tell us about Bitcoin. We need to know.
I think you mean 2021, Tyler.
No, what I meant is Bitcoin's
Oh,
moment
sorry.
where everyone started chasing people in the Bitcoin industry. After we had been chasing everyone, happened in like 2017. And that moment for NFTs really hit a fever pitch where all of a sudden we're just playing aircraft traffic control and curating the inbounds, and that happened sort of the end of last year and into the beginning of this year.
Cameron, you're doing my job getting Tyler to clarify that. I appreciate it.
Right. And speaking of years, I mean, I think what sort of struck us when we started to dig into NFTs about 2 years ago in our diligence around Nifty Gateway is we went to an art fair, a digital art fair. We actually bought a CryptoPunk. Tyler bought a CryptoPunk using the Nifty Gateway software back then, and we met the founders of that art project, and the sort of the energy and electricity really reminded us of Bitcoin in 2012 and 13 when we found it. It was sort of like this secret that was hiding in plain sight, and we were just like, oh my gosh, we just have to be building on this frontier. And we just knew pretty quickly that Nifty Gateway was going to be a really important piece of Gemini, because when we started, we were very much sort of a Bitcoin exchange building into the future of money. And then with Ethereum, it's building into sort of the future of decentralized finance and Ethereum and that whole space. And with Nifty Gateway, we're like, we have to build this bridge into the future of art. There's no way the offline world being so not on the internet remains like the status quo. Like art has to move into this medium and be represented via tokens on blockchains. It just sort of became very, very obvious.
So it is a difficult concept to wrap one's mind around. I think Bitcoin was difficult in the first place, and then NFTs. I think it's a little bit easier because there's the visual component, or in some cases the audio component.
That actually throws people off, to be honest.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, because they say, wait a second, anybody can view this art. I can just copy it or take a screen grab. Why is there value here? And they don't sort of understand that anybody can take a photo of the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, but that's not the original. And the NFT sort of authenticates and gives provenance to this digital piece of art. And prior to the token or the NFT representation, digital art, you couldn't really authenticate it or say, this is the original, this is what the artist intended. And so it sort of makes the digital canvas viable. And that's really challenging for people to wrap their head around. And I think in the early days, even when we were talking to people in the art world, they just simply didn't get it, because there's this whole complex built around art, the physical art, from galleries to managers to sort of this all the middle processes and things like that. And when you tell someone you can actually assetize a digital piece of art and an artist can go direct to the consumer, they sort of really struggle with that element. So yeah, it's sort of, I think, maybe obvious to the three of us and the people in our world. But outside of our world, the same way Bitcoin was sort of not obvious to people in capital markets. They said, "Wait,
Right.
money doesn't work like this," and you're like, "Well, what is money?" And then you start going down that rabbit hole and realizing that money is a lot of things, and most people don't think about it critically.
So I want to talk a little bit about the business side of things. As I indicated earlier, the number of headlines are difficult to quantify, but I think Nifty Gateway is a little easier to quantify. So we've got there's a number of sites out there that are now doing their best to calculate market share of each of the NFT exchanges. I think one thing that all of those calculations have in common is that Nifty Gateway has a lion's share of the market share, regardless of where you measure, as far as dollars are concerned. Now, I think it's important to note that there are other exchanges out there that have much higher volumes. They're a little maybe less curated. Anybody can go in, anybody can buy. And your business model is a little different. As you indicated earlier, Tyler, you wanted to curate, you wanted to assure a degree of quality. What is that translated to in dollar amounts? If you could give us an idea, the last number I saw was $255 million total volume that you guys have sold. Is that still roughly where you're at, or is there anything you can give us as far as updates are concerned?
Sure. So I think that number is now well above 300. So growth continues. Some of the interesting highlights, I think our largest sale on a secondary was over 6 million. And I guess another couple of highlights that are pretty proud moments for Nifty Gateway is that Beeple, who went on to sell the $69 million NFT at Christie's, established himself on Nifty Gateway. He did a first drop, and then his second drop, he cleared $4 million in a weekend. And then Christie said, "Hey, will you come and auction NFT here in the same lot as Andy Warhol?" So it's a great story because Beeple was creating digital art for 13 years, but there was no way for him to really sell it. He had never sold a piece of art because there wasn't the blockchain technology, which I think one way to think about this is it brings scarcity to digital art the same way that Bitcoin brought scarcity to money, which is really hard because the internet brought us abundance. We can copy a picture infinitely. Software is easy to reproduce, and ones and zeros are plentiful. So how do you create a fixed supply of digital money where people can't print more or sort of forge that? And so Bitcoin gave us that scarcity, right? In total, a land of digital abundance. And NFT blockchain technology gives us scarcity with digital art. So you can actually create four corners to something. It's an asset. You can sell it. And because of that technology and the meeting of Beeple's career and his great story of 13 years creating digital art, that sort of marriage created the moment for him to have his drops on Nifty Gateway and then go to Christie's.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned Beeple, but in a lot of ways, I think some of the other lesser known artists are even more interesting. Beeple was already relatively well known, even if he wasn't a millionaire. It sounds like he had a pretty stable life, family, house, that sort of a thing. Not all of the artists that have sold on Nifty Gateway are in that category. In fact, some of them were barely making ends meet. Is there one story that jumps out to you about a digital artist that was impacted by finally having the ability to sell their artwork?
So I would say that like all of people may have been well known and somewhat established in the digital art world, but he was never invited to Christie's. And so I think there's a lot of really cool stories like Fuocious. I think he's something like 18 or 19 with his proceeds that he earned from Nifty Gateway. I think he bought his mom a house. So really cool stories like that. Mad Dog Jones, Pac. I mean, they've been doing stuff, but I think not in center stage because you really couldn't. If you were a digital artist, you could get hired by a brand, let's say, maybe Nike or someone to do some commercial work, but you couldn't point to, hey, this is my piece of work. You couldn't get invited to a gallery in Chelsea to do an exhibit or a museum. I mean, there's been digital art in museums and things like that, but like it again, because you couldn't create a beginning, a middle, and end to it, you couldn't sort of package it. There's been digital money before Bitcoin, right? But before that breakthrough of decentralization, of the scarcity aspect brought, it really wasn't ready to have the fireworks that we've now seen. So I like to think it's this marriage of the technology and a lot of digital artists that has created this new sort of like, art's been in galleries, it's been in nature, it's been on street corners, and now it's moving to the blockchain. So it's sort of the new canvas, and Nifty Gateway is the gallery of the internet, is the way we like to think of it.
I like to joke that Times Square is the biggest NFT gallery in the world. It just doesn't know it yet. So one day we'll do a takeover.
I love that. So I think the impact that this technology has had on digital artists who are largely unknown, or who were largely unknown, is I think that the first place that we should be going rightly. Bitcoin had a similar analog. Investors around the world that weren't necessarily able to get into mainstream traditional investing all of a sudden had a way to buy into an asset that could appreciate in value. And we're seeing a similar thing happen with NFTs. We like to call it the democratization of investing, the democratization of art, investing, etc. But following once again a similar trajectory as Bitcoin, which is now having banks building products and other mainstream institutions, we are seeing mainstream artists getting involved. You mentioned Kenny Scharf, but you've also got Eminem making drops. Give us some other names that might be more known to give us an example of how mainstream is getting involved.
Yeah. So go ahead, Garen.
I was just say the Weeknd dropped a few weekends ago, and that's obviously a huge name. He did the Super Bowl halftime show. And Tyler, I think you had a few more names you were going to mention.
Yeah, so Deadmau5 did a collaboration with Mad Dog Jones. I think Deadmau5, I mean, he's a very well-known DJ. And the really cool thing about that collaboration is that he provides the sound, sort of the soundtrack to the NFT, and Mad Dog Jones provided the visual nature to it. And so these are both individuals who are very obviously creative and talented. One more in the audio side of things, one more in the visual. And the medium of NFTs allows you to marry those together. So I guess the closest thing we had to that was maybe back in the day when we bought CDs, there was album art and covers. But again, it wasn't like scarce. And so we can actually create, or creators can come together and build this content in a way that other mediums you couldn't quite mix them together and mash. So like you can buy a Warhol, but there isn't a soundtrack necessarily to that oil and canvas that now we've created with NFTs. So you can kind of bring these luminaries from different fields and build them together. So it's a very different type of content.
And I will say, I'm particularly excited about the music application. I still am a little bit resentful of the fact that I lost access to my entire music collection when I switched from an iPhone to a Samsung, because iTunes had it all. So yeah, if you guys can figure out a way to use NFTs to let me own my own music again, I'd really appreciate that. But I do want to move along into the business space here. So last time I talked to you, I asked if you thought any other cryptocurrency exchanges might make an NFT play, and if you guys were possibly the first of many. At the time, there weren't any, and I think your answer was a little bit unsure, like would other exchanges do this or not? Since then, we've got a little clarity. In fact, Binance made a big move opening its NFT exchange. Give us an update on where you see the future relationship between known cryptocurrency exchanges and their relationship with NFT exchanges.
So I think I don't know that much about Binance's marketplace, but I think that one of the things that we found is we really have a team or teams in Nifty Gateway building relationships with the artists and helping them understand the medium. And it's just sort of a little more a little more complex than just, hey, here's a place to sell things. And I think our team has done a really good job of building those relationships and fostering them. And as Tyler said, content is king. So I think ultimately marketplaces will rise and fall based on the quality of art and or content if they're in a different vertical that they provide to their users in the price discovery. And so, yeah, I think it still sort of remains to be seen. I think what you can expect from Gemini and Nifty Gateway is more integration over time, in the sense that maybe you can look at your portfolio in your Gemini dashboard or use Gemini to access your Nifty Gateway account.
And with that, with an eye to the future, I want to ask you to try in a minute and a half to define what is the metaverse. And second, how are you guys preparing to enable this using NFT?
Yes, so the metaverse is like a virtual world. If you've seen the movie Ready Player One, it's this idea that it's this virtual world that you can go and do things kind of like the real world. And in the virtual world that we'll live in the future, you can bring NFTs in there. So you can go to a gallery and view NFTs, buy NFTs, and whatnot. Some really cool applications of virtual worlds that we've seen so far are Sandbox, Decentraland, Somnium Space. They're very cool. Check them out. You can hang out them. And obviously NFTs, you can bring them from Nifty Gateway eventually into these worlds. So sort of recreating the idealized world, but in the virtual sense.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Tyler. Cameron, thank you both for joining us. It was a pleasure to chat with you again. Looking forward to following your progress on the road.
Thanks, Michael.
Michael.
Appreciate it.
Evan.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining us. Well, I guess good morning if you're joining us from the United States. Good afternoon and evening if you're joining us elsewhere. My name is Michael Dubstein. I'm Associate Editor of Blockchain and Cryptocurrency at Forbes Magazine. And I'd like to ask everybody to give us a virtual round of applause. Welcome Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss to the virtual stage. I'll clap for everyone. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you, Michael. Great to be here.
It's a pleasure to be speaking with you again. First of all, I do have to take a moment to congratulate you for making the cover of Forbes magazine lately. I had the pleasure of recently crossing paths with it at an airport on the way to a reporting trip, and it was cool to see crypto make